get started. We have a quorum.
Sure. Let me hit record here.
Recording in progress.
Okay.
Any changes to the agenda tonight?
I don't have any.
Okay. Move on. Anyone from the public online or in the room that would like to speak on anything not on the agenda tonight?
We have Amy in the room. Amy, I don't know if you had anything to say that's not on the agenda for discussion? No. I would also just note that we did receive, and I forwarded around several emails from residents about some of the amendments. So if you've not seen those, there was 3 that I sent out over between, I think, yesterday and today. So if you've not seen those, let me know, and I will resend those.
3 was the number I had, so it's good.
Great.
Didn't miss any.
Great. So we're consistent.
So, Eric, you've got one, you're on the City Hall box here, and then you have another one that's you that's muted.
Oh,
Anybody see that?
that's off of my laptop.
Okay.
So that's
Pay no attention to that one.
yeah. Pay no attention to that one. That's just the camera on my laptop and
All right.
the microphone, so that there's not the echo in the room.
Ah, okay, good.
And Eric, what are we going to be seeing Brendan and Christine on, or are we?
You'll see them on the City Hall box.
I don't see them on my screen yet.
Well, the camera needs to pan over to them.
Oh, the city, well, the one is that you're on, okay.
I'll
Right.
move to the table and make some sounds so it comes over.
Right.
I just need to shout, I guess.
So I don't.
No, we can hear you.
This one is not. This is not like the owl where it's voice control.
Oh,
This has
okay.
to be manually moved.
Okay. Would it help if I moved closer to Christine?
Sit where the mayor sits.
You're fine. You're fine.
I mean, I think we've got you on the screen.
Mayor for the night.
So you're.
If you moved one seat over, it might be a little more helpful.
However you want to do it.
That's fine. I was anticipating more people. So.
Me too.
You just want to get right next to Christine. She intimidates you.
No. She was the one way off to the side until a moment ago.
Yeah, I don't want to sit at this table, but
All right, let's get to the next item, which is approval of the previous meeting minutes. That was April 4th.
Yep.
And
Minutes were sent out with the agenda materials for everybody.
yeah, let's see, were we all here?
You were all
Yep.
here, yes.
We were all here. So anyone want to make anyone? Brendan or Sarah want to make a motion?
The minutes of April 4th.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll second.
second. Any corrections or edits or comments?
No.
Okay, all in favor of the minutes, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
I
Right?
Okay.
Then we're all in favor.
Great. Thank you. For that.
Keep moving pages and I lose my agenda. What did I do with it? I didn't. Sorry.
Mike, the next item up is the continued discussion of the land use regulations.
All right, that's what I figured. But I'm trying to find I just had my agenda in front of me. Okay, let's move on to continued discussion. Here we go. All right. Eric, you want to take it away?
Yep. So this is, again, continued discussion on the proposed amendments to the land use regulations. I included 5 documents, 2 of which we've already seen. Actually, no, sorry, 3 of which we've already seen. 2 are new parts and pieces, primarily related to changes that we've already made or are proposing, included in the definitions, and several changes in the definitions and in the Appendix B, the Gateway zoning district, related to Act 47 changes that we have to make. So I thought we would start where we left off with Article 5 and talking about the priority housing incentives. I think there was some discussion on these items at the last meeting. There's some new information here that you did not see previously, so want to cover that as a new incentive. And then I think there's a bit of clarification, and Mike, I don't want to speak for you, but I think a clarification on what we included in the land use table at the last meeting versus what's included in the incentives for priority housing. So
Yep.
I will start with the incentive piece, and then we can kind of jump back. So the first thing I wanted to bring up is under, so there's a new section in here on administrative review. So we talked about this a little bit, I believe at the joint meeting with the Housing Commission, about having an option for home ownership and administrative review and things of that nature, and what that might look like. So I've added some language in here to say basically that if a project has 50% of the units are affordable and have units with 3 or more bedrooms and are offered for sale, so half of a project basically, if it's offered for sale, then they would be eligible for an administrative review. Right now, anything over 2 units, on our current regulations, anything over 2 units needs to go through site plan review before the development review board. So that requires a public hearing, that requires notification to the adjacent property owners, just like any other DRB hearing. What this proposal would do is say that if you're offering units that are affordable and 3 or more bedrooms, you could go through just an administrative review and not have to go through that site plan review process. It further goes on to say under item B that that conditions can still be placed on that project, and if you're proposing any additional relief, such as a waiver from the setbacks or a variance or going through the planned unit development process, you still would have to go to the development review board. So really, this is trying to capture smaller projects that may otherwise be, that would potentially be eligible for administrative review at a smaller scale. So we're not trying to capture very large projects in this process. But that's not to say that a larger project, for example, in one of our commercial districts, couldn't meet this standard as well. So for example, if a property in the central business district came in and 50% of those units were offered for sale, those 50% were also affordable and 3 or more bedroom, that could also go through an administrative review.
I would guess it's been a long time since there was such a project, right? That you
Yes,
can think
I
of.
would say that's correct.
Yeah.
I would say that's correct. So this is the only new section that you haven't seen.
Or can you put it up on the screen?
Oh, I am so sorry. Thank you for saying that, Sarah. I'm looking at it here on my screen and forgetting that I am not sharing. So sorry about that.
Right.
So it's language here under item 4 is what I'm referring to.
Yep.
In affordable, I know that's defined somewhere.
That's correct. Yeah, we have it
Yeah.
defined in this section and also in our definition section as
Yeah.
well.
Eric, can we go up and look at the bonus story?
Yep.
And what the reason I bring it up is really the comments we received from you and from others, and especially for the RA and RB zone. The maximum height is already 35 feet,
Yes.
which I believe, I know you've got some way of calculating building height, but 35 feet, I would think you could get 3 stories.
So,
And
sorry.
in those zones, how many 3-story buildings do we have? And if you have a density, a bonus story provision, I guess you could get 4 stories. And will that fit with various neighborhoods in the zones?
So
I guess you just asked that as a question.
yeah, so it's a good question. And so as a little bit of additional background, this section on bonus story is actually part of Act 47. So the language that's here is pretty much straight out of the statute, with the exception of the citations to our regulations. The key thing to point out here is under the first section of an affordable housing development as defined in statute. And the way that an affordable housing development is defined is that 20% of the units or a minimum of 5 units, whichever is greater, are affordable housing, and the affordability shall be restricted, et cetera, et cetera. So based on the definition of affordable housing development, I don't think any of those projects would even be eligible in the residential A, B, or C because of the number of units that you would need to have.
Yeah, you need to have at least 5 affordable
Of 5 affordable,
units.
or 20% or 5. So if you do the numbers, it's basically a project of like 25 units is what you're talking about. So, and we wouldn't allow anything of that size in the residential districts. So this bonus story really doesn't have any impact on those districts.
Okay. I'm wondering though about our maximum building heights in those zones anyway, for the same reason. And I mean, 35 feet is a tall building.
Yep. Yep.
And I mean, I look around my neighborhood and it's all, you know, single story, 2-story, buildings. And if you go up in other areas, that's generally what you see. And so, you know, I know there's concern out there about keeping neighborhood consistent. I guess that's the right word.
Yes.
I'm just wondering if it would make sense to reduce the building height in at least the RA and RB to 2 stories or something.
Let me jump real quick to the definitions, and I'll show you what we have for the, sorry for the scrolling. Here's our definition for building height, basically.
Right.
It's calculated on a certain number of different things, but the diagram that we use as well is kind of to help with that. So we measure to the mean roof level, so that does include some of the roof peak as well. So that's where some of that height is going to be accounted for, or to the peak, depending on the actual.
Wait, sorry. So the peak is 35 or the mean level is 35?
The maximum height is going to be, well, the maximum height is going to be 35, and it depends on the highest point of a flat roof is going to be that level, or the mean height between the peak and the eave for another roof type. So it depends on
Halfway between the peak and the eaves. Yeah.
So, you know, so if you look at it here, the distance between the peak and the eave is going to be what you're measuring to, or you're measuring to the eave on a flat roof, or you're measuring in other manner. So,
Well, and is the 35 feet, is that new? I mean, that's
No.
been around, right?
Yeah, the 35 feet is what that's been our standard for as long as I've been with the city.
Right.
So that's not a new standard that we're increasing. And in fact, we're actually decreasing the building height for the accessory dwellings, or for the accessory structures, if you recall.
Right.
To
Right.
have it be consistent with the primary structure.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, I had a question about that, but that we can go to that. That's going to be under section 4, so I'll just wait till then.
Yeah.
Mike,
Right.
if I could, the west side of town has a lot of 3 stories. I think they're less common on your side, but over here they're not uncommon.
No, yeah, I'm saying in the
Yeah.
in the RA and RB zone, they're atypical. There's more of them in the RC zone, I think.
But they don't, those
That's
buildings, Christine, they
Yeah.
don't feel out of scale within the city, I don't think,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
right.
So maybe it's okay, Mike.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to bring it up because, you know, there were some comments about it. So
Yep.
Yeah.
And as Brendan mentioned, that's not a new standard for us. So that's
Right.
been what we've had it on the books for quite some time.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the bonus story is a statutory requirement. The administrative review is a new section. So any questions about the administrative review piece? Oh, sorry. I wanted to point out before we got into the discussions, what I'm hoping to get to tonight, if we can, is the possibility of setting a public hearing on these amendments that we've been talking about. So that's kind of the goal where I want to get tonight, just given some of the timing of what we need for hearings and my time left at the city. So again, we don't have to get there, but that's kind of what I'm shooting for tonight. So anyway, wanted to just point that out at the beginning.
Okay.
So any comments on the administrative review language? I'm not sure if this is going to be far enough to really kind of get projects moving forward. But the Housing Commission is also working on some language and some guidance to provide to us on things like affordability, on bedroom count, on kind of what that affordability number looks like also. So there, we may have the opportunity to tweak some of this once we get some feedback from them.
I mean, seems fine to me. I don't,
Yeah, it's like you gotta hit every type of priority housing
Right.
at once.
Yep.
To get this. So
Yep.
Yeah.
So the only question I have, Eric, is just when I first read A, I thought, okay, and include units. Does that mean the project or the 50% of the dwelling units that are affordable?
In the overall project.
So
If you've got 4 units in the project, 2 of them need to be affordable and 3+ bedroom. If you've got 10 units, then 5 of them need to be affordable and 3+ bedroom for sale.
well, that's what I'm saying. So I'm wondering if that needs to be, if someone can interpret that as something other. I don't know. You know what I mean? Because when I first read it, I thought include units. Okay, is that units in the project or is that units that are affordable?
I think I agree, Mike. If the goal, Eric, is that 50%, at least 50% of the units are supposed to be both 3-bedroom and affordable, I might change it to something like at least 50% of the dwelling units in the project are both affordable and have 3 or more bedrooms, something like that, just to make clear that the units we're talking about are supposed to have both of those features.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, I can
I like
make
that.
more explicit. Okay, any other questions on that? So I want to jump up onto one of the incentives that's in here, just back a couple of pages. And I believe this is maybe a clarification that we need to make. So at our last meeting, the discussion was, there was a suggestion that we add into the RC district multi-unit buildings with 5 or more dwellings. And I believe, and Mike, I don't want to speak for you, but I think the intent there was because we were allowing for up to 6 units per building as part of this planned unit development incentive, and just to kind of have the relationship to make sure that it was known that we are offering 5 or more, but it's with incentives. So I think the idea here is not to allow for 5 or more just by right. It would have to be done with the incentive that we are requiring here of the affordability and or bedroom count. So I think in the use table, what we want to do is just add a footnote rather than adding it as a use, the 5 or more bedroom, and just say that that 5 or more units. So 5 or more units would be permitted in the RA, RB, or RC district, provided they come in as a planned unit development and are configured with 3 or more bedrooms as outlined in these standards. Is that, Mike, is that what you were trying to get at with the use table?
Yeah,
change?
I had the last meeting, my initial thought was, I was thinking that we allowed up to 6 units in a building. That was the most we could put in a building. And it went right over my head that was only with this incentive.
Right.
And because of the definition in the, in section 2 of RC that says it's, single family and multifamily neighborhoods, I thought, well, let's put the multifamily in there. I think that works for me if we eliminate that. If people are still okay with a maximum of 4 units in a building, even in the RC zone.
Well, that's statute now, so we have to be okay with that.
That
But
makes
I mean,
sense.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you're okay with that and not moving up
Oh,
to 5 or 6.
I see. Yes.
Yeah.
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 I personally don't have a problem with 5 or 6 units in a building in an RC because it is supposed to be more dense than the RA and RB, but who am I to say, right? But then what that does, if we allow it as a permitted use in that zone, then it eliminates this incentive in the RC zone.
That's,
Yeah. Right.
That's
right.
So I think the way to keep this as an incentive is to take the, and let me just jump to that section. So we would be taking the multi-unit 5+ dwellings. This would no longer be permitted, and we would just put a footnote, or I would just put a note in here that says see footnote whichever to reference section 514 on these incentives to do more than 4 units per building with the incentive provision that's built in.
Yeah.
But I go back to our earlier discussions a while ago. We talked about maximum number of units in a building for the different zones. And I thought we had it stepped up before the state legislation came through.
We did. So the language that's here now, the residential A and residential B, we were going to allow up to 4 units, and then it was going to be in the residential C was going to be up to 6 units. That's actually what's in our regs now.
Yeah.
That's our current standard. But because of the change to statute that requires 4 units everywhere, that's no longer an incentive in the RA and the RB. So
Right.
instead of trying to figure out a different incentive, it was just to go to 6 units for all 3 districts per building.
Right.
And only if it's configured as a planned unit development. That wouldn't be something that would be allowed by right. It would have to, or through the other administrative review incentive, it would only be permitted as a planned unit development, provided that the bedroom counts are being met as is outlined in Part A here.
So let me ask a question. How would people feel if we allowed, let's say by right, 5 or 6 units in the RC and then, 7 or 8 units as an incentive in the RC under this planned unit development?
I can see one member of the public in the room not.
Shaking her head.
Yes.
Yes. And Amy, I'm saying per building, right?
Yes, per building is.
And that's if they meet the dimensional standards.
Well, that's going to apply for anything. Yeah, I mean,
Right.
any project, regardless of whether it's a planned unit development, it's a use by right, it's a conditional use, whatever the case might be, still need to meet all the dimensional standards for setbacks, for lot coverage, for building height. Still all need to meet the parking minimums on site, and that all needs to still be under the maximum lot coverage. So there are other mechanisms to kind of limit what's actually going to happen.
Do you foresee that there are a lot of properties that could happen on that Mike was describing?
I think, by and large, the majority of the properties in the city are of a dimensional standard now that there's not going to be many that would be able to add more than 4 units. And most of them would probably, it would be tough to add 4 units, even with what's there now.
So the only fear would be I don't mean to say it that way, but if someone's to acquire 2 properties or 3 properties adjacent to each other, does that then give them the ability to do this?
If they combine the properties, they would have to bring it in as a planned unit development to get more than the 4 units. They would
Yeah.
make a really big
Okay.
property with 4 units on it.
Yeah. So in a way, we could do this, Mike, but does it really?
Yeah,
Didn't get us
I'm going back to the definition of the RC is more dense than the RA and RB. And so, all right, if that's the case, if that's how it's described, why do we have the same limitations, for lack of a better word, on how many units you can put in a building given the fact that you have to meet dimensional standards anyway.
Well, and Mike, I think some of this is prior to Act 47. I think the definitions made sense because we did have
Oh, yeah.
stepping up of the densities, but I think it's maybe more of a question of how we're describing the districts and whether or not it's, maybe we need to look at the zoning map as well and look at potentially changing the zoning districts for some parts of the city and potentially increasing density to if we do still want to maintain multiple residential zoning districts.
Yeah. Well, and I'm suggesting basically one more unit per building in the RC than the RA and B. Go 5 and 7, something like that, just to differentiate a little bit. The fact that it's higher, there's supposed to be higher density, but I don't know. I may be barking up the wrong tree. I don't know. That's fine.
I guess, well, I don't think it's a secret that in general, I'm in favor of trying to incentivize the type of housing that we've identified as a priority. I guess I don't want to make the RC different from the RA and B just to make it different as is. I think, I would be comfortable if, like, right now, if you were to build one of these, I'll call it a priority project, you can get up to 6 units per building in all 3 in our A, B, and C.
Yep.
So if we wanted to do, say, 8 in C, I wouldn't have a problem with it, but I don't have like a strong feeling about it, and I think that would be good policy just as is. I'm not sure it really matters to me whether it's C has to be different from B and A.
You mean as part of the incentive
Right.
to have like
Yeah.
6 units per building be the incentive for the RA and RB and 8 units for the RC as the incentive.
Right.
Again, with the planned unit development meeting all the
Right.
standards, et cetera, et cetera. I can definitely do that if that's where y'all are wanting to go.
I do think that I'm fine with that, but since there's only 3 of us tonight,
Yeah.
I think we need to delay this conversation until we get more people, and especially, I know Abby wants to
Yeah,
give input on this.
Yep.
Yeah, I know. It's hard when people don't show up and you table something because of that, but I'm having the same feeling, Mike.
It's fine with me. I don't.
Yeah. So let's just try to move forward so we can.
Yeah.
Is that okay, Eric?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. And like I said, even if we set a public hearing, just as a reminder, we can have the discussion at that hearing and still make changes after that. And
Right.
still have more discussions after that. The hearing does not require us to do anything specific other than take specific public comments on the draft amendments. So,
Okay. So that's good. So then we can continue on. I think that makes sense.
okay.
Or comment on a few things?
Sure. Sorry, Mike. Amy's in the room and wants to comment. And Terry, I see you have your hand up as well. I'm not ignoring you. I just wanted to get some of this conversation squared away first. So.
Hi, Amy, and be nice.
Hi, Amy.
I'm nice, you know.
I know you are. I know you are.
We miss you.
I know. Hi, old folks. No, not old folks, but like old group.
That's okay.
Old folks now.
No offense taken.
Anyway, I guess I was just curious about when we start thinking of all these densities that we also think of how the infrastructure works with all this, how, like, because I just, down in the RC in our area, I just think of densifying it, but then I'm like, but there's like no street trees on the street. You make things more dense, there's the heat island effect adds up. There's just a lot of other things besides density, so I guess I just want you to look at all the different factors, and I'm all for affordable housing. I think it's great. I guess I just want to make sure we're doing it in we're looking at all the angles. So That was just one thing I was thinking of. So I'm glad to hear that you're gonna continue this conversation, and honestly, I just haven't been paying attention as much, so I'm gonna dig in and maybe be here for the next meeting just to add some more comments.
Yeah, and I think if I could just comment on that, Mike.
Sure.
To that point, just for everybody's information, these incentives are would only be permitted through the plan unit development process. The plan unit development has specific standards for review of landscaping, of siting of the buildings, of stormwater, of traffic impacts. It looks at all of those components as part of that process with the review at the development review board through a public hearing. So there's a lot of opportunity for input and discussion with the plan unit development process. Which is the only way that these incentives would be permitted.
Okay.
So it's.
Because I do remember we were talking about
Yep.
that when I was here, and I guess we were thinking that there wasn't as much design guidelines as I had wished.
Right.
So I don't know if things have changed at all, but I guess I would just want to make sure if we're going to be doing these PUDs, we just want to add a lot more information that will support multi, 3+ bedrooms and families and things like that, and there's actually amenities to support those communities.
Yep.
So.
Yeah, and again, like I said, that generally will come in with the site, with the planning and development review. It in essence is a site plan review and kind of subdivision review all collectively combined. So yes, and yes, those are some things that we probably do need to revisit as well. But yeah.
Okay. Great.
And Amy, we wouldn't, I don't think we'd be having this same conversation had the legislature not, in their infinite wisdom, decided that all properties have the right to 4 units in a building. Mm-hmm. 6 units in a building.
Right.
Because, or 4 units in a building, I guess it is.
4, yeah.
Because
4, yeah.
we had initially in the RA and RB, it was a max of 4 units in a PR was the incentive, and 6 in the RC. And now we have 6 in each one because we went from 4 to 6 instead of 2 to 4.
Right. No, I get it. I guess I just find it so interesting because I feel like sometimes it's very narrow-minded and they need to be looking at the environmental impacts of it too.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
That's all.
Don't disagree.
Great.
Right.
Thanks, Amy.
Good to see you guys.
Feel free to stick around.
Oh, I am.
Don't worry, Mike.
I'm sure I'll have more to say.
All right, I'm going to go to Terry next, Mike, if that's okay.
Yep. Is Terry online? Yep.
Yeah, Terry, you can unmute yourself.
Getting all these former planning commission members.
I feel like
Yeah, can't get away. Anyhow, I have a couple of questions that are sort of questions and comments that are along the lines of what Amy was talking about. I guess my first really big concern is I wondered about the age of the infrastructure here, the sewer system in particular. I know we had a major improvement on Hickok Street, but the rest of the RC, I think, is pretty old. Possibly the oldest in the city. Is that right? Does anybody know?
I think that West Canal Street was redone. There's been areas, I don't know for sure, but I know that over the last 10, 15 years, there's been work to improve the sewer system, especially, I think, and water system in different areas. I'm not exactly sure which ones. Christine, I don't know if you have that more at the top of your head, or I'm going to throw you under the bus for a second.
I do not know offhand which water mains we've done. I know we have a list of the ones that still need to get done. I think this question would be better answered by someone from Public Works about volume impact on the existing infrastructure, because we do know we have capacity in our water and wastewater system to increase density.
Yeah, I would just add to that. So I think the oldest lines in the city are on Main Street, which are, as you may have noticed, are
right now.
currently being taken care of.
The Public Works Department, as the mayor mentioned, we have adequate capacity for additional density. We're nowhere near our capacity for water allocation or for wastewater treatment. So we've got plenty of capacity there. And the Department of Public Works is routinely evaluating the lines. They will look at, when a development project comes in, they are consulted on the project to make sure that the lines in the area where the project is located are sized adequately to service the project, and if not, the developer will need to make improvements to those lines. But they're routinely either slip lining or completely replacing the water wastewater lines to just make sure that they are routinely maintained. And that's part of the reason why we have a water wastewater allocation fee, is to help fund that maintenance.
Does that include stormwater?
Stormwater is a separate system. Thankfully, we have a separate municipal stormwater system that is also generally the same review happens when a project comes in with the Public Works. They look at the stormwater infrastructure. Typically, what we have been requiring is that there's on-site capture and infiltration, usually through some sort of underground storage facility. That's been the primary method and means that they've used or that they've required of projects, so that it's stormwater is being captured on-site, underground, and then allowed to slowly trickle out into the groundwater.
Okay, so that was the first thing, I guess, I was just concerned about the infrastructure and making sure that we did indeed have it was being considered. And I guess the other thing about RC is we are very close to the river, so I guess the stormwater was the other consideration. I live in RC, but I work on Pine Street in Burlington, where the runoff is a really big problem and stormwater is a really big problem, but it sounds like we have a different system here than they do in Burlington. Did I understand correctly?
Yeah, that's
okay.
What we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other concerns that I have about this are, it is already a dense area, and the heat sink is another concern that I have. So the more surface lot coverage we have, the more heat we're going to have. And so these are just considerations. And we also do, I think we can all agree that there's more poverty, and more low-income folks living in the RC than in the other areas. And so again, to burden the RC with, more density when we already have so much, I just hope that that's all being considered.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. Again, we're allowing these different sized buildings, but they have to meet the dimensional requirements. And part of that is open space and setbacks and all that stuff.
I understand that. I guess my concern is more, some of the concerns that we discussed when I was on planning years ago, with developers coming in and buying up lots and combining lots. And then, then all of a sudden we have a completely different neighborhood within a neighborhood. And,
Yeah.
And I know that we're trying to take precautions to prevent that from happening. And I also know that developers pay close attention to these sorts of things. And, we saw when I was on planning how developers pay close attention and, find ways to do things that might not be in the best interest of the neighborhood.
Gotcha.
So I just hope that y'all will continue to consider those things.
Okay. Yep.
Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Good to hear from you.
Yeah, nice to see you.
Okay, any other comments or questions about the new information in Article 5? If not, we can move on to Article 9, our definitions section. There are some new definitions. Sorry again for the scrolling. There are some new definitions and some new language just for clarification. Most of the definitions are being added for consistency with Act 47 as well. So I'll just quickly go through some of this, and please stop me if you have any questions. The first part is just some clarification in the intro, just to basically say that There's other sections that have definitions, and those definitions don't apply to this section, but if there's not definitions in both, then these definitions can apply. So just to acknowledge that there's the inundation hazard area and gateway zoning district both have their own definition sections. And then, sorry, I'm trying to find my cursor here. So the first definition is adding affordable housing development. As I mentioned earlier, this is straight out of statute, so nothing new here, or really nothing that we can adjust, quite frankly. This is a statutory definition.
Okay, can we not increase that 15 years? So affordability for a minimum of 15 years. And I'll tell you why I've been kind of pondering this is that, you know, the buildings, I live in a building that's 15 years old and we're having a lot of problems with it. And I just wonder if in 15 years, some of these buildings that are being built now will have some major problems. And then people who are in the affordable unit realm may all of a sudden be ousted because the owner has to sell the building because I don't know. I just wonder if.
So I would say to that, for the specifics of the affordable housing development, I don't think we can be more restrictive than statute. We could be less restrictive, but we can't be more restrictive.
Okay, so we can't say more than 15 years.
I don't believe that we can. Now, having said that, because this is specific to an affordable housing development, I think we can have different standards, and we do, that talk about affordable housing in general. So if we're talking about a project that has 1 or 2 units in it, we can have different standards for affordability for that. So for example, in Burlington, I believe a lot of their affordable housing requirements are for 99 years. So there are ways to do it, but for this specific definition, since it's a statutory definition, I don't believe we can be more restrictive than statute.
Okay. You know, just worrying about the 300 Main example, you know, that all of a sudden use this as affordable housing and all of a sudden people after 15 years are like, sorry, you're out of here.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I will double check on that just to make sure, but my guess based on what I know about statute and other parts of statute is we can't be more restrictive, but we can be less restrictive. So, but I'll double check.
Okay, thank you.
I would also like to clarify that 300 Main is not a capital A affordable housing development.
Yeah, I know that. I realize that. I'm just trying to think of a scenario where we might all of a sudden.
Yeah.
A number of people would have to leave a premise for that reason.
Okay, good question though. So the next is just changing some of the language. This is for daycare facility. This is again to match statute, pretty much deleting this last part because it's not, the definition was wrong compared to the statutory definition of daycare facility. So that's just to be consistent with statute. Deleting the definition of detached cottage because we're considering that still an accessory dwelling unit, just different standards for owner occupied versus non-owner occupied, which are included in section 5.1. Adding the new definition for multi-unit of 3 and 4 units per statute and 5 and more, really just pretty self-explanatory, I think. Next is emergency shelter. Again, this is a statutory definition that we need to include because this is now for lack of a better term, a protected use per Act 47. We cannot prohibit emergency shelters. Family child care facility, again from statute and to match our use table. Family child care home, again from statute and to match our use table. Next is group boarding and residential care facility. These are just added to match our use table so that there's consistency again. Let's see, next up is lodging establishment. This is part of the reason for these changes is to clarify that we can have lodging establishments that aren't necessarily your traditional type of hotel, motel, bed and breakfast type of place. Their lodging establishments are only allowed in certain zoning districts. I believe it's only allowed in the downtown, the central business district, and the gateways. So this isn't something that would, and I'm just double checking that. Yeah, central business district and the downtown and part of the gateway district. So it's not permitted everywhere, but this is really to kind of get at the question of short-term rental versus a lodging establishment. So we don't currently have a definition for short-term rental in our zoning regulations. We do have some language in the municipal code that was just recently adopted that addresses short-term rentals and the definitions of those. So this is really just to kind of clarify that a lodging establishment has services other than just a house or a room. So the purpose for adding this in is also to kind of clarify that somebody can't come in with a short-term rental and say, oh, it's a lodging establishment now, so I am exempt from your short-term rental requirements. This is to really kind of strengthen the short-term rental requirements that we've put in place so that people can't avoid that by calling it a lodging establishment.
Should, Eric,
Yep.
again, I maybe get a little bit crazy on these things, but should it be on a like a yearly basis? You know what I mean? Because on a daily basis may include 24-hour desk service. We're talking about a permanently providing, it's a hotel. You run it year round.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering if there's without that in there, if there's a loophole that someone says, well, you know, it's a lodging facility and I offer these things, but I do it, you know,
yeah.
However,
let me look at that. I think some of this definition came from several other communities that I looked at, so I'll double check to see and just try to clarify that.
Okay, all right. And I don't have it in front of me. I'm assuming there's a definition of bed and breakfast or inn or something?
There is, yes. Yes, okay. We do have a definition for bed and breakfast.
Yeah.
Good.
Okay, so moving along, next is just adding some additional language under principal structure for clarification, for consistency with an amendment that we're proposing in Article 2, that you can only have one principal structure except as configured with a plan unit development. Adding in a new definition of principal use. Some sections of the regulations call it the primary use or the principal use. This is just to kind of clarify that that's what we're talking about, the same thing in both cases. Again, a definition for property. We don't currently have a definition for property, but we are using the term in several instances, so just to clarify that.
So I had one question in there, actually.
Sure.
So principal or primary or predominant, what defines that? And could there be a situation where it became problematic without having that as a definition? Meaning, could somebody flip the two? I don't know.
It's a good question. I think they would have to basically change the use altogether if they were to flip what is the principal versus the accessory.
And what's the definition? Okay, principal or the primary or dominant use. Yeah.
And that's really going to be what's included in our use table is going to be your principal use or your primary use.
Okay. All right. I don't know. It just struck me as, is there ambiguity in there in any way? I don't know if anyone else.
I'll look at that again. I don't think there is, but that's not to say that it's not possible.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Sorry, just making a note to myself here. Okay, next up is a change from restaurant cafe to restaurant neighborhood. This is something that's kind of bothered me for a while because we previously have we have cafe as a use under retail sales, So it didn't make sense to have a use listed under a separate definition that's also part of a definition. So really the idea here is that this is a neighborhood use, not a intended for a smaller scale to provide service to a smaller area geographically, not a full-on establishment. So really just to clarify that it's a restaurant neighborhood rather than a regular restaurant, as is defined above. And then also eliminating eliminating the language about alcoholic beverages. I actually had a conversation with somebody not too long ago about this particular use, and the point that they made is in most places that don't have a license, they allow you to bring your own. So you're going to have it there anyway. So I don't think clarifying or categorizing this and not allowing it as the definition is going to have any real impact on whether or not alcohol is served at an establishment.
So, Eric, I guess the one question I would have is, you've got where food and drinks, and you don't define what drinks are, so presumably they could be alcoholic.
Correct.
Consumed either on or off premises, but you can't, I believe, unless the law has changed, you can't buy a drink, a cocktail in a restaurant and take it off premises.
That's right, and that would be covered with their liquor license, and they would be
Right. So, I guess it's okay. I was wondering if we should put, as permitted by law or something, but maybe we don't need it.
Yeah, I think you could almost always put that about
Yeah.
anything.
right.
We have to-go cocktails now,
Yeah,
post-pandemic.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
and even if so somebody buys a Coke and they bring it off site.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. But it's alcoholic beverages you can't take off site, I believe.
You can if they're closed.
Yeah, if they're closed, you can, right?
Yeah.
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 Or even if there's places where if you buy a bottle of wine, you can have it corked and take the rest home.
Take it
Oh,
away.
okay.
Yeah.
But to Eric's point, if someone was it's the liquor license that's.
The liquor license is going to be what dictates the consumption part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just realized that I need to add a reference here where it says see also restaurant cafe to make it consistent. So anyway, yes, so a change there. A little further down, retail sales, neighborhood commercial, again, consistency with our use table and with the section on retail sales in Article 5. And then I added this caveat of a size, because again, this is intended to be for more of a neighborhood scale. So it's, for reference, I believe the council chambers is, I measured this one time, this is about 1,500 square feet, I think. The whole first floor, basically all of the main floor of City Hall, I think, is 5,000 square feet. So about half of City Hall, including all the office space as well, would be 2,500 square feet. So large enough to be able to actually provide some sort of service, but not so big that it's dominating a neighborhood area. And also I want to remind folks that there are standards for retail sales and neighborhood commercial in Article 5, as I mentioned previously. So there are limitations on what can actually happen and what uses can be included in addition to what's listed in the definition here. So there are some other regulations that will dictate the retail sales part. And then I believe that is, one more, at the very end, a definition for front yard. So that it's clear what we talk about with front yards. So,
I'm glad you put that in.
any questions on any of that?
Oh, looks good.
Okay, great. So then the next section up, this is new language as well. This is in the Gateway District in Appendix B. Several of these sections are specific to statute, the changes to statute, the first 4 or 5 pages, and then there's some other changes that I'm proposing, really more for clarification to correct some interpretations that have happened. So if we start getting too deep in the weeds on those sections, we can move on so that we're not spending a lot of time. I think they're pretty straightforward, but we'll get into those here momentarily. So the first change here is related to bonus story. Again, with the change of statute, none of this matters anymore, so I'm just referencing the section on 514 for bonus stories and what's needed to meet that standard for the affordable housing piece. The next change is under the detached frontage section. So there's some dimensional changes here in the lot size. So it was previously limited, so this building form standard was previously limited to no more than 2 units. So this is really just to clarify that we're not looking for really big lots here. We're not looking for massive lots with multiple units on it, to kind of put some guardrails on the size of the lot that's permitted, to a maximum of 55 feet for single and 2 unit, or 100 feet for 3 and 4 unit dwellings, and actually reducing the size of the lot for the lot depth for all of them. This is also to bring in some consistency with the use table for our other districts, to make sure that there's the 75-foot part to be consistent from just a lot depth perspective in general. And then on the next page, this is again related to statute. Instead of having, basically just referencing the section 2.4 for uses, instead of trying to list them out here, because we do allow for more than just residential uses in this building form standard. There not many more, but there are a few more. So just to reference section 2.4 with the uses, and then again for clarification that they can have up to 4 units because of statute, and they can all be in the same unit building plus 1 accessory dwelling, as outlined in 5.1, if they can meet that standard as well. So, any questions on those? Okay. So the next set of changes, like I said, these are kind of to clarify and address some interpretation, some inconsistency that have caused a few challenges for me, but not anything major. So this first part is really, this is more just organizational. So nothing new here. So for example, the text under intent was listed down here in this kind of statement. So more of an organizational change. The next page is related to just, again, some clarifications about materials and what is and is not permitted. And that we do allow for more roof types than just what we say here. Flat roof or pitched roof. You can do other roofs. The biggest change here is under item C, is for attic stories. So right now we do not, an attic story in the gateway is not considered part of the overall height. What's happened in several examples of projects that have come in, based on the roof that they've designed, it's technically an attic story, so not counted on the height, but they've designed it in such a way that it basically acts as an additional story. It's generally been a mansard style roof, so the kind of steeper pitch, I believe one of the East Allen Street projects has the mansard roof that in essence acts as another story, but it's exempt from the requirements because it's considered the attic story. So this language under C is really intended to address that part, so that if it is of a certain pitch, we're going to count it against the overall height, so that you don't basically get this de facto, a bonus story and then another bonus story because you're doing a certain roof style.
Yeah, you've talked about that before, I think, Eric.
We've talked about this before, so that's really just to clarify the attic story component of what that means.
That one's always bugged you.
Yeah. So the next change is under signage. Again, this is just for clarification, reorganization. This random footnote is moved up to the intent. The biggest change here is really on lighting. We don't have any standards right now on sign lighting, so I wanted to include some language to basically say it needs to be top-mounted, external illumination, really focusing on the lettering itself, shielding, things like that. So a lot of this we have in other sections of the in our lighting section in, I believe, 410, the basic lighting section. So again, this is really just to clarify some of the additional detail for signs. This is specific to signs. There's other sections that talk about lighting for the property. This lighting would be specific to signage.
Good.
And then the next section, I believe the last set of changes for these are on,
I had one. No, keep going.
Okay.
It was lower down.
so
Yeah,
next,
finish up.
mechanical equipment and lighting. Again, it's clarification, moving some things around. The biggest change here is just to reference the last section we just looked at on lighting for signage. But also, I wanted to make it clear that infrastructure for exhaust vents, etc., cannot be located on the front of the building anywhere, regardless of where they are in height. Those aren't permitted on the front of the building. There was some confusion about that because there was discussion about as long as it's above the street height or the clear sidewalk area, it may not be an issue, but I wanted to clarify that that is not what we're looking for here under number 4. Number 5 is to address things like, for example, at Four Quarters, they have their giant grain silo. You're not going to put that somewhere that it's not going to be seen. So item 5 here is really to address that type of mechanical equipment. So it's something that's obvious, and so you try to blend it in as much as possible as a piece of mechanical equipment.
Do we have a definition of what is the front of a building? Is that always on the street side?
I believe we do. Yeah, I believe, yes, we talk about the facade and the.
Okay, so you couldn't claim that your front is in the back or something like.
That's right.
Okay.
Could not.
Okay.
So that's what item 5 is for, and then item 6 is to allow for basically, if the fire department, this is for fire department equipment, for life safety issues. So if the fire department says, I want the connection for this building on the front of the building, I want them to be able to have it there. I don't want that to be an issue that we say, sorry, you're not allowed to have that infrastructure there. So if the building, God forbid, catches on fire, they're hunting around the building to try to find their connection point. They know exactly where it is because it's where they want it to be for convenience to hydrants and other things. So I wanted to make it explicit. They already have the authority to do this, but I wanted to spell it out in the regulations to say that if the fire department comes in and says they want their connection here, they can have it there.
Okay.
And that is the only other change.
So I had one up, scrolled up a little bit to number 10, which was the temporary holiday lighting. Yeah, I just wondered how do you clarify holiday lighting and how long can holiday lighting stay up?
That's an area that I will not wade into because your holiday might not be my holiday. And
That's exactly what I mean. So basically you could have lighting up all year round if you were to say, because holidays pretty much are all the time.
potentially, yeah.
So we just don't worry about it.
It's in the regulations already. So it's not anything that I've encountered as an issue for any type of lighting. So we would, if an issue were to arise, we would look at other things like our nuisance regulations
Okay.
to address.
I just was thinking about it because I just was sort of going through that lighting situation near where I live here, and
Right. Yeah. That is definitely not holiday lighting.
right. But could you claim it as? And that's
I don't think that you could. And there's other permitting components that address that as well.
okay. All right. Anyway, so
So
as long as it's all right.
good question though. So
Eric,
yes.
another question for you. If you go back down to under mechanical equipment 6 or
Yep.
yeah, that one. On A, you've got on 6th line, you've got the fire department. And then on A, you've got the agency having jurisdiction, which I assume is the fire department. Is there anyone other than the fire department that would have jurisdiction for life safety? And because I'm wondering, what does the agency refer to the fire department? Does it refer to something else?
In this case, it does refer to the fire department, but I believe that's a statutory term for whoever is regulating life safety issues. So in our instance, it's the fire department, but it could be that in the future we delegate that out to another code division. So then they would become the agency having jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's in all caps. Is there a definition?
I
for
believe
that?
there's a statutory definition for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can double check that. anything else on this? Hearing none. Okay, great. So I'm gonna jump back now to Article 2, which we had some discussion about earlier. So the changes here, I'm gonna eliminate the permitted from the 5+ and do footnotes in all 3 of these, the RA, RB, RC. That'll probably change the order of some of the footnotes in general, so obviously I don't think that's an issue, but that is one thing that has changed since the last time and will be changing again. We added conditional use for retail sales in the residential A district. And then I added in some additional language under the district definitions per our conversations at the last meeting to kind of address the points that Mike had brought up previously. So this is the new language that I've added, and I believe it's only in these 3 sections, the RA, RB, RC. So happy to address any questions about those.
So let's see. Where in this?
It's all fairly similar, just
Yeah.
there's other language that,
So we're in, wait, sorry. I had a note. So on the chart, this is, I think, later, but it reminded me here. So the chart where we have the height regulations,
Yep.
right? The little red chart, and we've got 35 and 60, right?
yep,
And I think when we get to 4V, Article 2, we're not there yet, right? Zoning districts.
sorry, say that again, which one?
So, Article.
Scroll up, Eric.
Yeah, I don't know. Are we in this one or so on?
If you scroll up, Eric, we'll get the building height table.
Right, is that what you want to look at, Sarah, the building height table?
Well, just keep it in mind because I think there's a question I had that is when we get to the Article 2 zoning district
Okay,
that kind of reminded me why to think about that.
okay, so we're in Article 2 right now.
Okay, we are.
Yeah.
All right.
So I want to look at this language first, since this is new, and
Okay.
then we can jump back to the building height. The dimensional standards table. So
Okay, that's fine.
I'm
Yep.
gonna look at this first, since this is new language.
I just lost track where we were.
Oh, okay.
And like I said, it's very similar for each one. So I don't think it changes the intent of the districts at all, but just want to get your input on that first. Any thoughts or comments? Or concerns?
Let's see.
I guess I'm just wondering on the language for RC zone. If we go back to, if we eliminate 5+ units as a permitted or even a conditional use
Yep.
in this zone,
Yep.
if the wording should be similar to A and B, but the second line, friendly neighborhood, residential neighborhood with, higher density than RA and RB or something like that. You know what I mean? So it's consistent.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Because when I read it last time, single and multi-unit residential, that's what prompted me to say, well, then why aren't we allowing, multifamily 5+ units?
Right.
Or maybe the highest residential density zone or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I can revisit these because I'm noticing as well that the RA talks about low density and the RB about moderately higher density, and we don't really have that anymore based on the statutory changes. So
Right.
let me look at that again, and I can try to clarify that a bit more.
I think it's important. We still need these, but at the same time, they're not like governing anything in and of
Right.
themselves,
Right.
right? So
Right.
I think it's important to look at it, but I don't think we should overstate how much this is doing.
Yeah,
really.
these aren't providing any type of regulatory construct. They're really more just statements of intent.
Yeah, but we want them to be consistent with what we're allowing in the zones.
That's
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So
So for like RA, maybe it's the lowest density residential neighborhood or something like that.
yeah, and let me again, like I said, I think I know what I want to say with these to kind of get to that point. To kind of clarify, there are slight differences. In particular, some of the dimensional standards are different for each district.
Right.
But so let me work on that a bit more. But in general, does this align with the conversations that we've had as far as how we're describing these districts?
Yeah. The one I had, I guess, let's see, I've lost myself a bit. So section 2.10, general commercial C2, right? Can you scroll to that one? Is that the section we're in, I think, right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Okay, so this one says, and higher density multi-unit developments, but isn't the whole park in that as well? The Casavan, and do we have that?
Is
I mean, is there any separation between that or protection of that area that?
I think the protection comes in by the fact that the city owns it, and there's not a lot that's allowed in there.
Okay, and then it's just
and-
sort of talking about the two strips on the edge that is allowing the high density multi-unit developments, right?
Well, in Casavan Park is almost all wetland or floodplain.
Yeah, I was
I
gonna
think there's
Right, but-
I think there's 4 acres we determined at one point that's not in a floodplain.
And I think some of that's actually shifted. So I think
Yeah.
almost all of it is in the floodplain or in some sort of protected area.
But
Well,
the
and the
east,
problem is you gotta, to get to it, you have to cross wetlands and there's restrictions on how much of that you can impede, so.
That's
right, but isn't this included in the East Allen side, the what would be the south side of East Allen Street, right? Isn't that in the C2 or?
So Casavan, let me pull up the zoning map. So the pink
Oh,
area here, Casavan
yeah.
in total is in that. And then this property, this is the Hillside Industrial Park out on East Allen Street. This is the Maple Fields. This is Chuck's Mobile. So this is already kind of like a industrial-ish park, industrial business park.
So what color are those where the new mobile station and all that and those buildings along?
Those are the Gateway. Those are white, so they're in the Gateway district.
Okay, so those are white. Okay, that's my confusion.
Everything fronting on East Allen Street is
Is white gateway.
that's
Okay.
So how come
Sorry about that.
Hillside is not in the gateway? It fronts on,
That's correct. Their entrance.
why?
They do have the entrance onto East Allen Street, but Hillside is not in the Gateway zoning district.
I don't recall why, because it fronts on East Allen.
Not really. It only has a driveway on East Allen.
But if it owns a driveway, it fronts on East Allen.
I guess that's true. I think my guess is the reason it was left out is because there was no way to put in a required building line that would put a building on East Allen Street.
Right.
All right. Yeah, I don't care. I'm just asking.
Right.
So
So I had one more. Let me see if I can figure out where this was, Eric. So
is this with sorry, Sarah, is this with the dimensional standards?
this is with the heights.
Okay, let me go.
Yeah. Okay. So under section 2.5,
Yep.
Yep.
do you have that in here?
Yep.
Did they get switched from one document to the other or something? Okay.
Is that showing up on your screen, the table?
No. The table is. Okay, well let me read you what my note was and we can figure out where I took it from. So if there's the primary building, the maximum height is 35 feet or 60. But what if there's a non-conforming building on a property that say is higher than 35 feet? So accessory structure. So I'm talking about the accessory structure
Okay,
Um,
go to that.
what if the primary building is on the non-conforming in terms of the height? So under section 2.5. But Eric, where I found it, sorry about this, guys. Thought it was an interesting, a good one. So on the just if you go to the meeting agenda section, and you've got the documents as V1, V2, V3, and V4.
Yep,
And this one was in V4
yep,
under section 2.5.
yep.
Is that the same thing we're in now, or is that later on?
That's this. We're in that now.
Okay, so 2.5. Let me see. Accessory. Let me see if I can explain this. So when you build an accessory structure,
Okay,
we're saying that you can build it to a certain height in relationship to the building that's on there, right?
that's what we're proposing, yes.
But if the building is non-conforming and it happens to be more than 35 feet, somebody could build to that existing building, unless we specify that it's up to 35 or 60 feet in the other zone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a good question.
What's 75% of 35 feet? It's like 28, 27, 28 feet.
Mike, I think Sarah's point is, what if you have a non-conforming building that's at 50 feet right now in a,
Right.
for example, the residential district?
Well, that's what I'm saying, that we put a 75 feet of the principal structure to a maximum of whatever 75% of 35 feet is.
Yeah, it can only build up to the 30%, right? I guess that's what I was saying. Is that what we're shooting for?
And no more than,
Yeah,
no less than 10 feet and no more than X feet.
yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's 25 and a quarter feet is 75% of 35 feet. So
We would round it up to
maybe it's to a maximum of 25 feet or something.
6.25.
Yeah.
So,
Whoops.
I think that's
forgot
what we were
I forgot to bring
trying
over
to
the one.
Yeah. And then the 60-foot one in the other district.
So that's limited at 25 feet.
Okay. So that one's fine, right? We don't want to.
I think, actually, let me just double check to make sure for the heights. Yeah.
Central business,
Central
yeah.
business district, which is limited to 25 feet.
Okay. So that one's not a problem.
So that's a good question, though.
So maybe for consistency, it's just to a maximum of 25 feet in all these zones.
That's what I was just thinking as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, because the most, again, 75% of 35 feet is 26.25. So 25 is a little smaller than that, but I think we could live with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, I'm comfortable with that.
Does 25, just out of a practical reason, if you're building a building, is 25 get you a 2-story building?
It should.
It doesn't get you a 3, but it could get you a 2.
Should not. It won't get you a 3. It'll get you a 2, though.
Yeah.
Or it can get you a 2.
So a 35 could potentially get you a 3, though, right?
35 would not still
Okay.
get you with a 3.
Okay.
It could get you 2.5.
It could get you 2 and an attic
2 in an attic.
ish.
Right.
Well,
So
and
do
you
we
could
want
use
to?
half the attic for living space.
Right. Do we want to include it as an attic and keep it at 35, or do we want to just have it at 25 and not have?
Well, it's not 35. It's 70. Currently, it's 75% of 35 is the idea.
Right. Right. Oh yeah, you're right. Yes, got it.
Of the primary structure.
Got it. Okay, I got it. Yep. Sorry.
So yeah. So again, we're already talking about a max of 26.25.
Right.
For an accessory structure.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's a 2-floor building, basically.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
So, okay, anything else in Article 2?
Yeah, Eric, of course I do, right? If you go up to the table above this one, principal primary structure,
Yep.
I'm wondering, I like to see things right in front of me. I'm wondering about adding another column there that just says something like maximum number of units per building. So it's clear right there. I know it's in the table, but in the use table.
Well,
Yeah.
Mike, I think that's going to be hard to do because in some instances, we're not going to have any density limitations. So there is going to be no maximum that we can identify. And we would have to have additional footnotes to carve out the incentives that are going to allow for additional density and or the bonus stories for the affordable housing. So I'm not really sure how we could identify a max number of units.
Well, I think you could say, you know, for example, the RA and RB, or the residential zones, it's 4 permitted, 6 with incentives or something like that. I don't know how you do it, but
So you
it
could
just-
say
to,
not
to
a,
me, it's just easier to see if it's in a table as opposed to trying to figure it out from the use table. But that's me, and I'm nuts anyway. So
I see what you're saying though, Mike. I mean, if you can define it, could there be a column that had the definitive numbers on it? And if you can't, it has a code that says, I don't know,
Yeah.
undefinable.
These are
Adjustable.
dimensional requirement
Yeah.
tables.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel appropriate to add all of the other pieces of information into this space.
Yeah. This is talking about the outside. What is the structure look like from the outside? What is the lot size and lot coverage? It doesn't go to the inside, I think.
Right. True.
well,
I could,
yeah,
I
I
can
see.
what another table might look like to to get to that point and see. Let me look into that a little bit, Mike, and see if there's something I can
Okay.
put together to address that question. I'm not sure there's going to be a clean way to do it, but let me look at that.
I just think it might be easier to interpret rather than the footnotes. Or in
Right.
addition to it, I don't know.
But you're
I
not
throw it out. If you don't want to do it, that's
section
fine.
of the regs to find out how many units you can build.
What's that?
Amy.
I don't think you're going to look at the dimensional requirements section of the regulations to determine how many units you can build and all these other pieces of information.
We just, I don't think we can
Right.
put all information on one page. That's how.
I'm just trying to get something in a table form that identifies, you know, we talk about how many units you can put in there, and it's, I don't know, I just find it going through the use table. Maybe that's fine. I don't know. It's probably just me. Late at night.
Mike, I'll see what that might look like. Again, because there's so many options for density, I don't know that it's going to be a clean process. It may have so many caveats and footnotes in it that it's way more confusing than what you're thinking.
Okay.
So,
And I do, Mike, you often do this because you like to have things repeated so that they become more familiar as people read through all these things. Just
Yeah, and
feel
you
it
can
makes
see it in one
easier.
place.
Yeah.
no, I understand. There's also a matter of making sure it's understandable as well, and it's
Right.
not just creating more confusion.
Yep.
So I will look at it and see what I might be able to come up with.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, anything else in Article 2? I have one thing to cover in Article 4, and that's what I have. So, hearing nothing, I will jump to Article 4. The only change that was added here, based on our discussions at the last meeting, was under conversion or change of use, adding the caveat that if you're going from a conditional to a permitted use, that would not require a zoning permit as well. So, permitted to permitted, conditional to permitted, no zoning permit, provided that these three situations are met.
Yep.
Perfect.
Otherwise, nothing else. A few minor things, like adding a couple of words here and there as well, but nothing else has been changed in this section. So,
I didn't read it closely. You didn't put anything in there like Mike is a nut or anything like that?
I did not do that, but
Okay.
I might. No, I did not do that. So, any questions on that? Anything anybody wants to go back over, or are folks comfortable with what you've seen tonight and interested in potentially setting a public hearing? Oh, I see Councilor Oakleaf is online, has her hand up. So, Councilor, you can go ahead and unmute and speak.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Great work. Thank you for all the discussion and conversation. I learned so much every time I sit in on these meetings. I also have not been in the weeds a ton on this, so perhaps there's an interpretation area, or you can clarify for me. Is there some proposed changes where impervious surfaces would be acceptable as replacement for open space as part of setback requirements, or like I feel like I heard something about or saw something about walkways being accepted newly, like as proposed changes for part of setbacks, or I'm not 100% certain, so I'm just asking for some clarification.
So we do have a definition of lot coverage and what we count towards lot coverage. We do have some, in some instances, for example, things like any of the exempt uses, like ADA ramps or stairs to a front door, would not be included in that, mostly because they're providing access. With that said, if somebody's building a deck to beyond what would be needed for access to a building, that would count as lot coverage. So in Article 9, we do include a definition of lot coverage which addresses what will count and what will not count towards that total percentage.
Okay. Because I just don't have it in front of me, are those proposed changes, or is that existing language?
That is existing.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
The only thing I can think of in terms of impervious is we allow a 1 foot extension of a driveway into the side yard setback. Eric, we talked about that last meeting, right?
There is an allowance to encroach into the setback for a driveway, but that still counts as lot coverage.
Right.
So there's, basically anything that's going to be on the lot with a few minor exceptions is going to count towards the lot coverage. If it needs a zoning permit, it's going to be counted towards lot coverage.
Okay. All right. Thank you for clarifying. I for some reason, with all the changes that you're considering, and I'm really admirable of how well you all do at keeping track of everything. I had the impression that there were some additional lot coverage changes or incentives that might have allowed for things that would otherwise be counted as lot coverage to be removed as an incentive. So I'm glad to hear that's the case.
What we are proposing is some increases in lot coverage based on our priority housing incentives. So there are some increases that are proposed, but it's in exchange for getting the type of housing that has been identified as priority housing.
Yep. And we're not changing the meaning of lot coverage. It's what we're proposing is if you're building priority housing, you can get more lot coverage in very broad strokes.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Because it's been conveyed to us that lot coverage is one of the big impediments to additional development. And so we want to incentivize more lot coverage for the type of housing that is a priority.
I see. Are there other offsets proposed, like in lieu of, you can build a bonus story, you can have more units. Are there any other offsets for that expanded lot coverage in terms of a, stormwater, green space consideration?
So those would all be covered in other sections of the regulations as far as stormwater. I believe that's in Article 4. We have regulations on stormwater. Depending on the location, there's going to be, for example, in the gateway, there's going to be the requirement for private open area anyway, so that has to be met regardless of what the project is or what is proposed. So it's going to vary depending on the zoning district.
Okay. Even with PUDs?
Correct.
Okay. Great. I appreciate fielding a couple late evening questions. Hope you all have a good night.
Great.
Happy to accommodate you, Bryn. Thanks.
Okay. So with
we're at-
that, how are folks feeling about potentially having a public hearing on these amendments? That we can make additional changes, we can have the hearing, we can not do anything with it after the hearing. Like I said, we can review more language, we can look at additional information, but that's kind of, I think, the next step where we're headed is having in the hearing to address all the different changes that have been made.
What's the soonest we can have that public hearing?
I believe the soonest we can have it is going to be on May 23rd. That would be not our first meeting, maybe our second May meeting.
Yeah.
And you're out at the end of June.
End of June, right?
Yeah. So I think.
Again, that should not be a
Yeah.
consideration.
No, I understand. No,
that weighs
I
heavily on this
understand, but I
decision.
think realistically, that would give us at least one, hopefully two more meetings after with you if we want to make any adjustments. So,
That's right. And also to that point, in May, if we are, if what is proposed is you're all comfortable with and willing to forward that on to council, I believe that would give me at least one meeting with council to provide an introduction to them so that they can be comfortable, or they can hopefully understand what the amendments are and what that looks like, so that if it does get into a meeting after I am, if the council has a public hearing after I've already left the city, hopefully there will be enough information already shared with council so that they're comfortable with what the amendments are.
The other thing about May 23rd, it gives us another meeting of the planning commission where hopefully some of the other folks will be here to weigh in on some of the things we discussed tonight.
That's right.
That we also tabled that section.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me. I think it's a good date.
So do you need a motion for that?
It would probably be helpful. Yeah.
So why don't you want to make a motion to hold a public hearing on May 23rd?
I'll move.
Sarah, that's your motion?
Yeah, you go ahead.
And then you second it?
I'll
Great.
second it. Kind of a game of chicken here, huh?
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you all very much for that.
Okay. City updates as we're past our 8 o'clock hour.
Just barely, though. We covered a lot of ground.
Yeah,
You did.
and it was only three of us. I don't know.
I thought it was a good discussion. Despite the fact that you slapped me down 4 or 5 times, it was a good discussion.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Mike was at the one. It was just me, him, and Connor, and
Right.
yeah, we get.
That's right.
Can't
Yeah.
What's that?
The last time there was only 3 of you here, we did a similar thing where we got through a lot of material in a short amount of time.
But the mayor was here too, so I made her night, but because she could hit me down a few times.
As I enjoy.
What's that?
Nothing, Mike.
As she's wanting to do, right?
Yes.
City updates, Christine?
Just a couple things. Housing Commission, they made some updates to our Housing Trust Fund to try to make that a more viable product for helping folks obtain and retain affordable quality housing. Staff was able to sign an agreement with Opportunities Credit Union, the current lender that runs through, so that we can actually work with different financial institutions, maybe expanding the reach of the program. They also determined that they would like more time to work on their language before reconvening with us. I'll leave that to you, Eric.
Yep.
Our Finance Commission has begun annual review of our Economic Development Strategic Plan, and they're meeting next month to continue that review alongside the Executive Director of Downtown Winooski. There's not a ton in there that's super relevant to this commission, but I will keep you posted. And our, at the last city council meeting, we approved using $10,000 of reserve funds to complete 2 traffic calming studies over the next year. There have been 8 requested by residents since we adopted a traffic calming policy last year, and we had to cut that out of the regular budget. So we've approved use of reserve funds to do 2 of them. And I just want to, I'm sharing that information, but also to make it very clear that the study is to evaluate conditions to inform further or future improvements. It doesn't necessarily mean we'll have the money or ability to implement recommendations in the upcoming year. And then our only other big news is Main Street, which you have likely noticed. So,
Is there something going on?
you stay.
As I try to turn left off of LaFountain Street.
Yeah. I will turn it to Eric.
Thank you. So the only items I had, just as a reminder, the amendments on the rezoning that impact the O'Brien Community Center are going to public hearing before City Council on May 6th. As the mayor alluded, the Housing Commission, we had originally talked at our last joint meeting with the Housing Commission about a possible May meeting with them later in May. It looks like they are wanting to push that to June. So June 25th is the date that's been identified so far. So please mark your calendars for June 25th if you're available.
That's a Tuesday.
Tuesday. Sorry, yeah, that's a Tuesday. That's not, that would be in lieu of our second June meeting, unless for some reason we need a second June meeting. That would be June 25th. More to come on that. And I believe that's all that I had.
Eric, I have a quick question. If you know, today I got notice of a Act 250 permit for. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Yeah, that notice is for the lot 7D, 17 Abenaki Way. There was a slight modification to the parking garage structure that's being built that they needed to update the Act 250 permit for. They had a permit, or they have an Act 250 permit from several years ago when the proposal was to do parking garage, hotel, and then the VEIC offices. They're moving forward with the parking garage, and so the permit needed to be amended to just reflect a few minor changes with the garage part of it. So that's what the notice is that you received. That basically they've submitted their applications to the state and are moving forward with that.
So as I read it, it said changing 22,000 something square feet of office to 85, if I got that number right, workforce housing?
I believe that's correct. That's part of what the new proposal is. So they're replacing the VEIC office space with residential units.
Yeah.
And I believe they are, I don't know if they've identified price points specifically, but I think they are looking at some affordability in that project.
So you don't know what it meant. I think it said workforce housing. I didn't know if you know what that meant.
It's middle. It's like around the middle range, so not super low income, but more middle AMI. And they're using money from VHFA, so like these will be restricted affordable.
Okay. Yep.
And when would that be finished? Do they have a projection for that? Just curious.
Is it late next year?
I want to say next year, yeah, is what I think they're shooting for.
So pretty quick.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, I think so.
Good. Be a good addition to the downtown.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Other business.
The only thing for other businesses I had just as a reminder, our next meeting is scheduled for May 9th. So
Gotcha.
We'll get an agenda figured out for that, and yeah, see you on the 9th.
Okay. Anyone else have any other business? If not, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay. Thank you, Christine, for being here. Thank you to Amy and Terry and Bryn for coming in, giving comments, and the folks that I forget all the names of the folks that sent comments in, but thank you folks too. And Eric, as always, thank you.
Thank you.
All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
See you on May 9th.
Thanks.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Have a